皆様、こちらはネザーランドはですね、おはようございますの、時間です。そして、日本の皆様はこんにちはでしょうか。これからですね、生配信をスタートさせていただきたいと思いますが、毎回のようにですね、音声チェックを、してから開始したいと思います。聞こえましたら、ぜひ聞こえるとかですね、教えていただけたらと思います。映像、音声良好です。よかった。はい。それでは、早速ですけれども、始めていきましょう。今日はですね、このスクリーンにも私の お隣に映っておりますスペシャルゲストの方がいらっしゃいます。早速ご紹介させていただきたいと思います。今日のゲストはですね、元、米陸軍、対即席爆弾チーム、そして現在は、私立探偵事務所を経営されております、アル・ジョンソンさんにお話をお伺いしたいと思います。Thank you very much for taking time out.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I'm glad you're back on YouTube after being gone for a while. So we'll see if they ban this one or not. It's kind of a mark of honor if they ban us. So we'll see what happens. But you're doing good work there, so keep it up.
Thank you. 今日もですね、お話しされたらすぐに通訳をするという、そんな感じでやっていきたいと思いますが、私をですね、ゲストとして呼んでいただきましてありがとうございますと。で、この番組がですね、また YouTube にもし消されることになったら、それは名誉なことでありますので、頑張りましょうという、ことです。はい。それではですね、いろいろと質問をしていきたいと思います。So now I'm going to, I would like to introduce your title. And first of all, I need to tell everybody that my main channel is still under suspension. 私のメインのチャンネル、ガナーマサコチャンネルはですね、2週間、2 weeks、停止になっておりまして、生配信、ライブストリーム、そして、アップローディングビデオ、動画をアップロードするのもできないという状況にありますが、これは、I have to be proud of myself because it is what we are going to talk about. 今日お話しする内容にダイレクトにつながることですから、めぎることなくですね、やっていきたいと、思います。それではですね、アル・ジョンソンさんのプロフィールをご紹介したいと思います。Now I'm going to introduce Al. アル・ジョンソンさんは、ワシントン州の私立探偵事務所Secure Point Investigationsのオーナー兼主任調査員です。同事務所は日本人エージェントが所属するワシントン州唯一の私立探偵事務所。アルさんの主な専門はオープンソースインテリジェンスとソーシャルメディアインテリジェンスを使った調査。以前は米陸軍で即席爆発装置対策とテロリストネットワークの特定と標的化を専門としていました。2012年から2019年までタイ王国警察191部隊の顧問を務め、爆発後の調査支援、テロリスト細胞ネットワークのターゲティングと特定に関するトレーニング、その他、潜在的なテロリストを過激化させるプロセスや情報戦キャンペーンについて専門的に研究されました。その間、中国共産党などの誤報、ミスインフォメーションに対抗するための脱過激化作戦の一環として歴史の調査もされております。2008年には米国務省フランクリン賞をご受賞されております。はい。ということでですね。はい。私もアニメの、so basically this is, I think for us Japanese, this is really unique time that we actually be able to hear from a real detective. In Japan, Detective Conan, which is famous anime, many people watch it, but we don't see the real ones. 日本人の皆さんは本物の探偵、アニメでしか見ることのない名探偵コナンではなくてリアルのですね、探偵さんにお話聞けるのはとても貴重なことだと思っていますとお話ししました。それでは、Al, so could you please, I already introduced you, but could you please say hi to everybody first?
Oh, sure. Hajimebashite. My name is Al Johnson. And as Masako said, I've got kind of a mixed history. So initial investigations was through the U.S. military, where we mostly used it for initially explosive devices and then gradually moved back in the investigations towards eventually leading to why people became terrorists. What was the motivation for that and the information that went into it. So everything along the way we kind of investigated.
Okay, sorry, teacher. Okay, let me translate. 皆さん、はじめまして。私はですね、米軍のまずはじめに、先ほどもお話ししましたが、即席爆発装置対策をしておりました。そしてその後にどんどん、職種がですね、このテロリストなどを探していくようなフィールドに、移りました。
Okay. Because it wasn't enough, initially we looked at, how do you disarm a bomb? But the real question is what makes a person want to make that bomb? And so over the 14 years that I was in the military, we gradually went through that. And then when I got out of the military, went to a company called Magen Solutions Risk Management, and then worked for, initially, we did our own private programs, but then I began to work with the Royal Thai Police, Unit 191, and Thailand was having problems with their own terrorist insurgency in the south of Thailand. And so we worked with them, and that was an eye-opener because you really had to focus on what were these streams and what was the information that was coming out in an open source intelligence mechanism, because you had to work with the tools that you had available, not necessarily what the US government had, which was these massive tools. So that was a very good experience for being able to, on a very, not necessarily a budget, but a very basic tool level, to get good information packages about the terrorist network and people that supported the terrorist network and the people trying to influence other people to become terrorists in the south of Thailand. So that was a very good opportunity to work and develop that skill set outside of the U.S. government, so without all the U.S. government resources. And then after that, of course, came to the civilian side.
Okay. Okay, sorry. そしてですね、私は、この爆弾装置を解除するようなチームから、テロリストの調査の方に移っていったんですけれども、それはなぜかというと、爆弾処理をしていく中で、どうしてそもそも爆発物を人々は作るのか、そこの動機というところに、注目をするようになりました。そしてまた、米軍で14年間勤めた後に、マーゲンソリューションリスクマネジメントというところに、はい、ちょっと機材の関係で一旦途切れてしまいましたが、また、戻ってきたと思います。はい、はい、続きます。14年間ですね、米軍で勤めた後に、民間企業マーゲンソリューションリスクマネジメントという会社に勤めました。そして、タイの191部隊で、捜査を協力することになりまして、そして、そこでは米軍が持っていた特殊な機材とかそういうものを使わずにオープンソース、手に入るものでどうやっていろんな情報を集めたりするのかっていうことに対してとてもいい経験になりました。で、タイの南部の方がですね、タイの南部の方で、いろんなこういった状況が悪くなっていたので調査をしていたわけなんですけれども、そこでですね、テロリストになる人たち、そしてテロリストに、を養成しようとする人たち、そういった人たちを、分析することをいろいろしていきました。はい。So, okay, I just want to make sure I ask the audience. 皆さん、今ですね、戻ってお話を再開しましたけれども、見えていますでしょうか？ 見えているはずなんですけど。大丈夫かな？はい、大丈夫です。Okay. Okay, so, okay, everything is going good. Okay, so, so, so basically you just introduced us how you went through your career path. Okay, please go ahead.
Okay. And so, as you probably know, in Thailand, as we were looking at what these information paths were that radicalized groups of people, that were targeting groups of people, it was at that point that we actually noticed that there was a CCP information campaign using these same kind of techniques about how people were moving into radical fundamentalism. Those same patterns we noticed with the CCP, and that led us to some more stuff.
Okay. このタイでの調査によってどうやって人がどんどん過激化していくのかというものを、分析することができましたし、そのパターンというのは中国共産党が行っている、情報戦とパターンが同じということも発見しました。
And so, using these techniques, we were able to discover that the CCP network actually wasn't, even though we detected it initially in Thailand, it was transnational. So it was active in the United States, it was active in Japan, very active in Japan, South Korea, and Southeast Asia. And so that was, initially what kind of showed us that this application can come to, you don't have to use it for radical, fundamentalist terrorism like Islamic terrorism. It could have a broad application for other groups that attempt to radicalize and attempt to use disinformation to manipulate in certain ways. And all this was OSINT. And so the amount of information that you could get just from OSINT could help you track networks and see what their agendas were.
Okay. この中国共産党をも使っているこのテクニック、インフォメーションウォーっていうのは、このタイで一番最初に私たちは見つけたんですけれども、でもこれは国際的に中国共産党が行っていることであって、例えば日本とかアメリカ、そしてまた、韓国、そしてまた、東アジア、あちこちでそういったものが見受けられます。すべて、このオープンソース、手に入る情報をもとにいろいろ、分析することができております。
Right. So, as you know, probably in 2019, coronavirus hit. I got a call, I think December, from a pretty good friend that said, "Hey, you may want to get out of Southeast Asia, go back to America, and ride this out. Something just escaped from a lab." So, 2019, I came back to America, and then through a couple of mutual friends, they said, "Hey, why don't you apply your skill sets, what you were doing overseas, to domestic private investigations?" So we started up a private investigation agency and pretty much did what we've been doing overseas, for a long time, but brought those skill sets back here at home, so that people could access them, for doing those things. And we also help train people about understanding the dangers of what information you put out there and how easy it is to gather information and either manipulate you or defraud you, or actually do criminal actions against you. And so that's kind of what we'll talk about today is these dangers that people don't realize they're doing in their interactions with FASHTEK, in their interactions with their cell phones, with their interactions with technology, the footprints that they're putting out there, why it's so dangerous, and how to kind of protect yourself from those things.
Okay. 2019年、so I want to make sure. So in 2019, you were in East Asia, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I was based in Thailand, still working for the Royal Thai Police. Yep.
I see. 2019年にですね、私はまだタイにいて、タイの政府と一緒に仕事をしていたんですけれども、2019年の頃に、知り合いから電話がかかってきて、コロナが、起きるかもしれないっていう情報もその時で入っていました。で、そういうわけで、この自分のこれまで培ってきたスキルというものを海外だけではなくて、その技術を自分の国本国に持ち帰って、そしていろいろな、新しい仕事を始めるということで、そういう流れで、今アメリカに戻っております。で、どういったことをしているかというと、このいろいろなファッシュテックと呼ばれるファシストプラステクノロジーですね、そういったものを使うことによって、どういったことが危険なのか、そういったことも、発信研究して仕事にしていますし、またいかに簡単に、そして、いろいろな犯罪に巻き込まれていくのか、そういったことを日々の仕事として、行っています。で、今日もそういったことに関して日々皆さんが接するファッションテックの使っている中で どうやって皆さんの情報が集められて、どうやって犯罪に悪用されていくのか、これを解説したいと思います。Okay.
Oh, good. And so, and there's probably a little explanation we have to do about the term FASHTEK. If you, and one of the things I remember you actually interviewed my father earlier, and his famous saying is organizational structure dictates outcome. So the organizational structure and
sorry. I'm sorry, I'm not good at memorizing everything. So is it okay if you could give me like 3 or sentences and I will translate and you can go right back?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. それではまずですね、ファッシュテックという言葉を説明しなければなりません。で、私の父をガナハさんは以前にインタビューしました。で、私の父が言っていたのは、Organizational Structure Dictates Outcome。なので、この組織が出来上がった、その出来上がった背景自体が、その組織が何をするかという結果までも結論付けているということです。Okay.
So if you understand an organization by its structure, you have to, when you're analyzing it, you have to call it by what it is. You don't use a euphemism. Don't use a fake name for it. Be as accurate as possible in your description of an organization.
このある組織がどうやって出来上がったのか、それを注目しなければなりませんし、その組織をどういう名前で呼ぶのか、それは気をつけなければいけません。間違った呼び方で呼んではいけません。この組織がどういうものであるかっていうのを、名は体を表すということで、本当の姿を呼ばなければいけません。
So a large problem that people have is they don't accurately describe things. They don't put a label for something that accurately describes what it is. As an example, if someone says the word mainstream news, well, it's not mainstream and it's not news. So if they say those two words, it actually changes the nature of it and you can't really understand it. That's why we say, for example, corporate disinformation outlet. It's a corporate entity that provides mostly disinformation. They're not reporting the news anymore, and they're an outlet for it. So by accurately calling something what it is, you can better analyze it and better evaluate it and actually make a better system for a better outcome.
ということで、例えばですね、ですからそのある組織というものをきちんとした名前で呼ばなければいけません。例えばメインストリームニュース、メインストリームメディアという言い方がありますけれども、この名前も間違っています。メインストリームでももはやないし、ニュースでさえもない。だからメインストリームニュースと呼ぶのは間違い。本当の呼び方というのは、例えば私が呼んでいるのは、コーポレートディスインフォメーションアウトレット、つまりコーポレートは企業、ディスインフォメーションは、偽情報を流す、アウトレットは、流す機関。ですからそういった偽情報会社、こういうふうにきちんとその働きで、的確な呼び方をしなければいけません。そうじゃなければそれが何であるかというものを理解することにもうできなくなってしまうからです。
So going to the tech, when we hear people say it in America, it's usually big tech. They'll say, oh, it's big tech. When they talk about, Facebook, Twitter, Google, that sort of thing, they'll say big tech. But what that does in the minds of the listener is it makes him think of the organization is operating as a big business, so that their motivations, their activities, what they're doing is motivated by profit, is motivated by the things that big business do. However, when we analyze their structure, when we analyze their financial structures, their management structures, their ownership structures, they're not operating as big business. They're operating essentially symbiotically with as agencies of government and agencies of other governments and other organizations. So it becomes fascist in nature because it believes that nothing is outside the state. All of your behavior must be controlled by the state, by pretty much a uniparty, right? And that speech is controlled, that individuals' rights don't happen. So that we call it FASHTEK, because that then describes what its motives are or what it behaves as and what it's organizationally structured as. So by calling it FASHTEK, you understand its motives and you're better able to operate within that space because you're not misunderstanding.
ですから、例えばアメリカでは、ビッグテックという、Google とか、YouTube とかそういったものをビッグテックというふうに、呼ばれていますけれども、それも呼び方が間違っているわけです。なぜなら、ビッグテックと発したら、その聞いている人たちからすると、それは会社として利益を追求するためのビジネスをしている組織であると。こういうふうにこの言葉を聞くと人々は想像するからです。でも、実際はそういった働きでは、実態としては ありません。何をしているかというと、政府と協力関係を持って、人々の言論を統制したりだとか、要するにやっていることは全体主義、ファシストと変わらないわけであって、そういった言論統制をする機関になっているから、なのでビッグテックという呼び方は間違っていて、なのでファッシュテックとファシスト、そしてテクノロジー、こういった呼び方をすることによって、彼らの本当の何をしているか、そしてどういった組織運営がされているのか、彼らのモチベーションは何なのか、そしてじゃあそういったものに対して私たちはどういうふうな態度であるべきなのか、それが分かってくるからです。
So that's one of my favorite, my analogy for this is if you have shoes on a floor, right? So you line up your shoes on the floor as you enter the house, and a cat sits down next to the shoes. And you say, well, because that cat is next to the shoes, that's a pair of shoes. And the problem is if you call a cat a pair of shoes and you try to operate like that, you tie a cat to your feet as if it's shoes, you're just going to get torn up. You're in for disappointment. And no matter how much you keep calling it shoes, no matter how much you try to say this is shoes, it's still fundamentally a cat. It's organized as a cat. And the sooner that you recognize what the actual organization is and treat it as such, interact with it as such, the sooner you're going to be able to come to better outcomes. And so that's why we use different terminology a lot of times than what most people say. And that's because we want a successful outcome. We want to understand the entity that we're dealing with, and we want to be able to analyze it correctly and then operate within it most efficiently.
ですから私はこの、例え話をするのが好きなんですけれども、例えば片方の靴があるとして、そしてもう片方には靴ではなくて猫がいると。そうすると靴と猫なんですけれども、これをペアオブシューズ、一足の靴というふうに呼んでしまって、でどんなにこの靴を履こうとしても、でも猫は猫で所詮あって、で自分の足にこの靴紐を結ぶみたいに猫を結ぶこともできないし、靴としてもそもそも機能をしないわけです。だからこれは靴ではなくて猫であると、言わなければいけない、わけです。Okay, hold on. Again. はい、ちょっとですね、この機材の関係で、ちょっとコネクションがどうもうまくいっていなくてですね、よくこのこの音声画面が変わってしまうんですけれども、大変すいません。ちょっと妨害なのか何なのか。はい、では続けたいと思います。続いてるかな。はい。はい。はい。ですから先ほどの靴と猫の例えもそうですけれども、この猫は猫であって靴とは呼べない。ですからこのそのものを本当の実態が何であるかというのを把握して、そのものとして名前を呼ばなければ、どうやって私たちがそれを分析するのか、そしてまたどうやって私たちがそれと向き合うのか、そういったことも分からなくなってしまうので、きちんとした呼び方で呼ばなければいけない。そうすることで、良いこの結果が得られることになります。OK。
Okay, I'll talk fast before the CCP jams us again. How's that?
Yes, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. So that's why we call it FASHTEK. And so what we're primarily talking today is how to kind of protect yourself from some of the more common mistakes or the more common behaviors that you have interacting with tech that open you up to criminal activity, exploitation, fraud, stalking, as well as reducing the amount of profit actually that these FASHTEK companies make off of your activities that you never get paid for. So, you know, in some cultures, that's the definition of slavery. I work and I never get paid. Well, you're online. Every transaction you do online, every time you watch a video, every time you send messages, a company makes money off of that, and you don't get any profit from that, even though they're making money off of your behaviors. They're making money off of your personality, your friendships, but you don't see any of that money. In fact, they'll use that money and try to silence you depending on what it is. And you've experienced that with your YouTube channel where they silenced you. They made a lot of money off of you and you know, over the years. So, you know, how do we reduce that as kind of what we're talking about today? We're not talking about, you know, hiding you from the government. The government will find you, you know, especially large governments like the United States. You're not going to hide from them. They will, you know, they'll move people next door to you that are neighbors. They're going to put people on you. They can see through walls. It's insane. So the government, you're not hiding from the government. No one can hide from the government, right? They'll pretend that they don't see you, but they're watching you. What we're talking about is hiding yourself from guys like me, for example, that have basic skill sets in OSINT and SOCMINT, and being able to reduce your footprint of what you don't want people to see, that will do bad things with that information. So that's what we're talking about today.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. 今日お話しすることになるのは、どうやって自分の身を守るかという話になるわけなんですけれども、でも政府からどうやって隠れるかとかそういう話ではありません。どうしてももう政府から逃げることはできませんし、彼らは見ていないふりをしていても、どんな状況でも皆さん私たちを常に見ています。もうこれは逃れることができないレベルです。でも、こういったファッシュテックというのは皆さんが友達とメッセージを送り合ったりだとか、この SNS、ソーシャルメディアなどを使うことによって、これからですね、利益を得ているわけです。で、そこにまた犯罪も生まれてくるし、要するにストーカーとなっている。で、またこの日々の私たちが何もないと思っているこの、利用していることに関してお金を生み出しているわけですから、それは言い方を変えれば奴隷状態ということです。我々が何か仕事をしてそこから利益が生まれるんであれば、それは自分たちのものになるべきなのに、利益が生まれていることも知らないし、利益が生まれているのに彼らはそれを取っていっているわけです。だから皆さんのパーソナリティからお金を生み出して彼らは奪っているわけなんです。なので、その彼らの利益というのをどうやって減らすか、そしてまた、政府から逃れられませんけれども、私のような人間、要するにこのテクノロジーを使える一般の人からどうやって逃げるのか、あるいはフットプリント、皆さんが、自分の足跡をネット上で残していますけど、そういったものをどうやっていかにして減らすか、それをお話ししたいと思います。Okay.
So we're still alive. So
Yes.
the first thing that we'll probably talk about, and I'm loath to share the screen because I'm not sure what that's going to do to this system, but I'll talk about the cell phones first. The primary thing that most people don't realize is that your cell phone is an amazing spy device. The invention of the smartphone especially has been an absolute boon to people that collect information, because your cell phone, almost all cell phones, are always on. Even if you put it in airplane mode, sometimes even if you turn it off, there's always a collection ongoing on your cell phone about with your information sometimes you're not even aware of, that's then collected, it's stored, and then it's sold. And sometimes it's sold 2, 3, 4 times to people that aren't even connected with anything that you think you've downloaded on your phone, companies and organizations that you don't even know about downline. So your phone initially is your biggest leak of information, besides social media, comes from just your basic smartphone.
Okay. まずはじめに携帯についてお話をしたいと思いますが、携帯というのは実は、スマートフォンというものが登場してから特にそうですけれども、もうスパイ道具になっています。そして、 この携帯というのは皆さんが携帯の電源をオフにしたりだとか、また、機内モードにしたとしても、でもずっと実は、オンになっているものであります。そして、例えばそういったオンになっていないと思っている時でも、皆さんが全く自分と関係ないと思っているような会社にでさえ、そのデータというのがもう2度、3度、4度とデータが売り買いされている。ですからこの携帯を持つということ自体がこのソーシャルメディアを使わずとしても、自分の情報が漏れている、ところになっております。
So some of the information that your phone has, to give you an example, your phone actually has pretty much if you have anything in the last, probably 5 to 7 years of a phone, you actually have 2 radios inside. So there's one radio that you control, and then there's a second radio that you have no control over whatsoever. And so even if you put it, like I said, in airplane mode, you turn it off, that second radio is active. It's still collecting data. It's still transmitting that data out. And so that's the first thing you need to realize is that every time you carry this with you, you are carrying a camera and a microphone and a location device that is on activated and can be monitored either live or I can get the information later and then kind of track it.
まず最初に知らなければいけないことというのは、携帯には2つの、電波、ラディオと電波が備わっていまして、1つは皆さんがコントロールできるもの、もう1つは皆さんがコントロールできないもの、この2つになっています。だから電源をオフにしたとして1つが消えたとしていても、もう1つというのはずっとオンになっていて、そこで皆様カメラとか、マイク、そして GPS、そういった位置情報を得るものをずっと持ち運んでいる。で、そこから絶えずそういった情報が取られています。
And the more apps that you put on your phone, the more chances and the more people that you're actually giving that information to. So every time that you download an app on your phone, you have opened up even more pathways and more people that are looking inside your phone and getting that information. So it's not just the phone company. When you download an app, that end of user license agreement says pretty much that you're okay with giving your information to everybody and they'll resell it and they'll resell it and they'll resell it. So you maybe trust the app developer. For example, a Fitbit, like a fitness app that you download with, you jog and it tells you where to go. You may trust that developer, but just realize that the app, they're reselling your information and it goes 3, 4, 5 different companies down line. And you may not trust them if you look at who those companies are and what they're doing with your information. So every time you download an app, you're giving more and more people permission to look at your information on there.
Wow. I almost feel like forgot to translate, but just listen.
Oh, sorry.
It's so,
ごめんなさい。
no, it's not. Like, this is so scary thing. まず、その次にお話しするのが、アプリの話なんですけれども、皆さんが携帯にアプリをダウンロードするということはどういうことを意味をなすかといえば、アプリをダウンロードすればするほど、皆さんの情報を盗む窓口が開いていくという意味になります。で、このダウンロードしたときに、ライセンスアグリーメント、合意するようなポチッと押しますけれども、その中にはですね、どういうことが書いているかというと、平たく言えば、あなたの情報を誰にでも売っていいですよっていうことに合意しているのと同じです。で、そういった会社というのは、もしかしたらディベロッパーは、このアプリを開発したところは皆さんは信用するかもしれないですけど、でも、ディベロッパーが売った会社、で、その会社がまた売った会社と、どんどん4、5、4つ、5つと会社がどんどん売られていくわけですから、皆さんはこの人たちが一体皆さんの情報で何をしているのか、この得体の知れない会社、こういった、信用もできないような会社のことをも考えなければ、いけません。OK。
And a lot of times what people can do with it, that includes your, sometimes if you have to put your bank information in things, if you have to put your passwords in there, if you put, some information, that information can be stolen as it goes through and then resold. One of the things that we do, for example, for clients that people are surprised about is we go on the deep web and we will look at hackers and thieves that have stolen huge amounts of databases. And then they'll put your information out there and they sell it. So they're selling your passwords, your social security numbers, your bank account numbers, your addresses, this sort of thing. And they're selling it, credit card numbers and that sort of thing. So what we'll do is for people is we do a screening and we'll go on the deep web and then we look at what's being sold and we say, hey, yeah, by the way, this bank account is being sold right now. Your bank account information is being sold by this guy on the deep web. You may want to change it. You may want to do some security upgrades on that. In the U.S., identity theft is a big deal because people will take your identity, create new credits, get credit cards, do all sorts of things that are pretty bad with that. Also with children, they'll do stalking a lot of times, and we'll talk about that a little more later. But the information like your kids are putting out there, because kids live on this thing. Adults, my generation, we can operate on it, but we don't live on it. Kids now, 5 to 15 years old, they're living on it, and they're putting information. We found people that were through their kids. In other words, the parents were very good about information, but their kids are putting all this information about where they're at, who they saw, everybody they were with on these social apps, and anybody can get a hold of it. So you may be good at it, but you be careful your kid, because he can put things out there and it really goes out. So some of those kid apps are actually some of the worst for stealing information, is actually those little game apps for kids, because they know kids aren't, they don't care. They just put information out there. So you have to be very careful about it.
Wow. 例えばですね、皆さんが携帯を使いながら入れる銀行の口座の情報ですとか、あるいはいろいろなパスワード、そういったものが盗まれていくわけなんですけれども、私たちの探偵会社の仕事としてクライアントから依頼されて行うのはディープウェブと呼ばれるものを調査します。で、そういったもので何がわかるかというと、ハッカーがどういったものを盗んでいるかというのがそれによってわかります。で、ハッカーはもういろいろな情報をもう盗んでいて、例えばクレジットカードとか皆さんの住所ですとか、もういろいろなもの、多岐にわたるものを盗んでいるんですけど、このディープウェブというのを見れば、誰々さんというハッカーがあなたの何を盗んでいる、例えば銀行口座をこの人が盗んでいますよっていうのが情報が把握できるので、こういう状況が起きてるからクライアントに対して盗まれてるからこれはもう変えた方がいいですよとか、そういったアドバイスをしています。なのでこのスクリーニング、調査をすることによって、精査をすることによって何が売られているか、そういったものを見ています。Okay.
And then to give you a personal, are we still online?
Yes, but not for. はい、皆さんお話の途中ですね、ちょっとこの現象が起きて大変申し訳ございません。10分ごとに今見ていますと、これが起きてしまっているので、もう10分ぐらい経ったらですね、皆さんに私から、こうなりますよっていうことで、お話をアナウンスして切り替えるような形にした方がいいかもしれません。今日は大変申し訳ありません。で、先ほどのお話の続きですけれども、このアメリカではですね、アイデンティティセフト、要するに灰乗りというか、この人のアイデンティティ、身分を乗っ取る、盗む、これが大変な問題になっているんですけれども、そういったことも、これによってもう起きているということです。そしてまた、子供が携帯を触ることによって大変な問題がまた次々と起こるわけなんですけれども、ストーカーもそうですし、本当に小さい子供たちがですね、もう携帯なしでは生きれないぐらいの状況まで依存している。で、どういうことを我々は注意しなければいけないかというと、親がこういったことを分かって、対策していても、子供が知らなければ子供の方からどんどん情報は漏れていくわけでありまして、ですから子供のですね、このネットのこの関係、 どうやって使っているかとか、そういったことを注視しなければいけません。特に子どもたちはゲームをしますけれども、このゲームのアプリがどんどん子どもたちから情報を吸い上げることになっております。Okay, I am so sorry, but please
No, it's okay.
continue.
So, and to give you an example of why or how it can also affect you, sometimes your phone coming into proximity of another person's phone, that's also known. So what we call heat maps. So I know who's been around who based on the proximity of the phone to one another, because the phones will talk to each other, and that's becoming actually more and more. In fact, phones are talking to alarm systems. They're talking to these doorbells that are there. Some of these smart technologies, your phone actually interacts with it, so they know if you've been near other devices. An example of this was actually many years ago. I went to Indonesia. The Indonesian government had captured a while ago. They had actually captured the Bali. One of the organizers of the Bali bombing killed, hundreds of civilians, and they captured him. And he agreed as part of his plea deal to talk about, okay, how he became radicalized, what was his path to bombing, all this sort of thing. So I'm just going down to interview him, to talk to him. And I brought Michael Yon. Michael Yon came with us. So we actually went down there and talked to him, and he told us these things. Well, my smartphone, was next to him for quite some time. And there's a few other people in that room. So it was just next to him. And at about that moment on PayPal, a person that was working for the United States government but had been born in Iran and raised a little bit in Iran and has an Iranian name, sent money to support, some Southeast Asia stuff for what we're doing to help, the U.S. government tier 2 diplomacy. So in other words, everything's above the board. But because my cell phone on the heat map was near a known terrorist's cell phone, we were close to each other for a very long time as we talked. And at the moment PayPal, money went internationally through PayPal, PayPal shut me down. And for life, I'm banned from PayPal for life. I sent them notes. I'm like, look, here's my State Department invitational orders. Here's all of this. And they didn't care because my phone was hot next to a terrorist for about a couple hours. And I'm learning from him how not, in other words, how do we stop terrorism? That's my entire, 14 years of my life is how do you stop, terrorism? But they didn't care. It doesn't matter because a computer will look at it. If a computer says, hey, you're with these bad guys, that's a bad thing. So you have to be careful about even who you're near. You could be at a restaurant and somebody's sitting at a table behind you and they're a drug dealer, and you might be affected and not even know it because some heat map somewhere says you were next to this guy.
Wow. And still you're banned from
For
PayPal?
life. I don't even think Elon Musk can get me out of that PayPal jail. So
Wow, everybody's gonna surprise when I translate this. 今お話しされていたことなんですけれども、ですね、この携帯同士がお話をするんですよね。情報通信し合うわけなんですけど、携帯と携帯の位置が、これはヒートマップと呼ばれるものなんですけれども、こういった情報も集められています。で、例えば、スマートテクノロジーで、この携帯がですね、この、ドアのアラームに近寄ったとか、このドアに近寄ったとか、そういった機能を持っているように近寄ると、通信し合って情報を集め合うんですけれども、一つ私が経験した体験をお話ししましょう。インドネシアに行った時のことです。私はテロリストで、たくさんの人を殺した、犯人がいてインタビューをする機会がありましたので、彼に会いに行きました。でその時のインタビューは、マイケル・ヨン氏と一緒にいたんですけれども、その時に私たちは彼と一緒に長い時間ですね、数時間話をしていました。で要するに私の携帯とこのテロリストの携帯が一緒の隣にあったわけです。で隣にあって長い時間、同じ場所にあったわけです。そして、その彼というのは、このイランの名前を持っている、イランの人なんですけれども、向こうで生まれてですね、でそういう名前も知られているこのテロリストと、携帯が一緒にあることがあった。でそこで何が起きたかというと、私はペイパルという送金システム、国際的にお金を送金できるペイパルというのを使っていたんですけれども、ペイパルが私の携帯がこのテロリストの隣にあったということの情報を元にして、私のペイパルをですね、シャットダウンしました。でもう一生使えないようにされてしまいました。 これは繰り返しますけれども、この携帯が隣にあったからなんです。で、どんなにこのペイパルに対して、いや私はこういう仕事をしていって説明をしたとしても、それは無駄で、一生今もって使えなくなってしまいました。ですから、このヒートマップというこの情報をですね、体験をしても、おります。Okay, so we have, I think, 5 more minutes to go.
Okay, I'll make it quick. So how do we protect against that? Well, a couple things you can do. One is, since that time, I've been very, very careful about, or try to be careful about cell phones and where your cell phones end up and who you're next to. But in the private investigation business, you have to go into some bad areas. You have to get close to some bad people, drug dealers, child abductors, all that sort of thing. So, how do we protect ourselves as private investigators? Well, a couple things we did. One is the only thing you can really protect from your phone going out is put it in a big Faraday bag, but that's pretty obvious. It's a big bag and you roll it up. You can have these different bags and you kind of roll it up, you put it in there and it blocks the signal completely. But, somebody looking at you, well, why do you have your phone in that big bag? That's a little obvious. But one of the simple things that we ended up doing, and it's kind of retro, but I got this. It's just a basic Nokia, the old school phones. Japanese might like it. I mean, you guys still use faxes, right? And it uses something called Kali OS. And so there's no trackers in there. It's actually the camera's disconnected. So you can't access the camera. That's actually physically disconnected. And it's a basic phone. It only does little apps are on there, but it only does text and phones. So there's no data going out. It's very, very basic, very simple. I can't put apps on here, but this is for my basic phone. If I need to go somewhere and I need to call in an emergency or text, this is the phone I use. And there's no Google on there at all. So Google spyware is not on there whatsoever. There's no Apple spyware on there. There's none of that infrastructure that they put on there to constantly send data. So that's one small technique that we did. And then if I need a smartphone for whatever reason, this is kind of a custom phone. And you can get these. Linux phones are a little better than Android phones or Apple phones. And this is actually a Brax, Rob Braxman. We'll talk about him a little more later. This is a custom phone. It's a Brax 3 phone from Rob Braxman. And it spoofs Google. So it's a different operating system. It's a Linux operating system on here. And so we can do his stuff. So it's pretty basic. And there's some spyware, but you have more control over it. So you have a lot more control over this than you ever could with a Google phone or an iPhone. And so these two, and then a Faraday bag helps protect me from hopefully ever getting banned from something else for life. So.
Okay. Before I translate, I want to make sure. So your camera, the phone on your camera disconnected, meaning you don't have camera or you have it, but it's disconnected.
Well, there's a camera here, but because it's kind of a custom, we physically disconnected it. So it's physical. There's no physical connection, even though the software won't access the camera on normal cell phones. I or hackers or other people can remotely activate your camera and it doesn't show up, right? So I can turn on your camera, I can turn on your microphone. But on this one, just to be extra safe, we physically disconnected the camera on it. So it's just text and just voice. That's it.
I see.
Different operating system. There's no Google, there's no Android. It's called Kali OS, Linux based. So this is one option that we use to protect ourselves from that heat map and from that association and from a lot of the spyware if we're doing things.
Okay, thank you. それではですね、そういったこのヒートマップなどある携帯からどうやって自分たちの身を守るかなんですけれども、私は仕事柄ですね、この危険な人ですとか、いろんなところに行かなければ、なりません。で、そういった人たちと近づかなければいけないんですけれども、こういったことが起きてしまったら、困るわけですから、携帯をですね、この情報から遠ざけなければいけない。で、どういったことをするようになったかと言いますと、Maybe we will be cut off, but もしかしたら切れるかもしれませんが続けます。一応お知らせです。この人々に近づくとき、そういった仕事をするときには、携帯をですね、カバンに入れます。そのカバンというのは特別なもので、いろんな情報を発信しないようなカバンになっています。でもこういったものを持ち歩くと結構怪しい感じがしますから、別の方法を考えました。それは何かというと、 アップルとかですね、そういったものではなくて、古い、I thought like I was gonna say here we go, but I think we're still on. 古い携帯を、使うわけです。ノキア、今手元にあるのはノキアですけれども、そのキャリー OS、リニックス、そういった機種というのは、こういった Google とかも入ってないし、Apple も入っていないし、テキスト、文字送信と電話機能だけ。で、カスタムメイドもしている機種もありますけど、その機種を売っている人のお話とか、それはまた別でしますが、そういったものから逃れることのできる、OS とか機種っていうものもあります。で、カメラもついてはいるんですけれども、そのカメラというのは、この物理的にソフトウェアとカメラを切り離すことによってアプリがですね、遠隔から普通の携帯ではあり得ることなんですけれども、できるんですけれども、遠隔から皆さんの持ち主に知られることなく、携帯の音声、マイクをオンにして、カメラもオンにしてスパイを見ている。そういったことが物理的にできないようなものをその現場に持っていくようにするようになりました。ということで、所有者がコントロールをちゃんと持つことができる携帯を持っております。Okay. I think we are we're still going on.
Oh, it's still going. Okay. They're not jamming us anymore. Okay. I think they realize we're not going to stop. Okay. So those are a couple of small things that you can do. And like I said, the Brax phone is another one that you can get if it's a smartphone. So those are
Brax phone. Okay.
Brax phone. There's different ones out there. There's like Linux, there's Pine phones and things like that. But if you have to have a smartphone, then these are better because you have more control over it. And then there's not as much spyware and you see what's going on with it. So the more control you can have over a phone, the better. But if you have an Android phone or an iPhone, you have no control. There's a lot of spyware going on. Even if you think you've shut things off, it's still collecting, it's still sending stuff out there. So just be aware of that. And then a quick story on this one. This one actually got banned from one cell phone carrier in America. I won't mention their name. But I had this on a service and we put it in, it worked for about 2 weeks and then it went off and they said nothing wrong. Long story short, they would not accept this phone on their service. I had to go to another carrier that would accept it because there's no information, because they saw that there wasn't that much bandwidth. It's just text. It's just voice. So when it's off, it only sends out the signal. This is where you are, triangulate with the towers. And the cell phone carrier that I initially had didn't want it on there anymore. They said, we don't want this phone on our system. And so I had to look around for another phone system that would accept this phone. And the only thing it is voice and text. So there's actually a cell phone carrier that gets upset if they're not spying on you, if they're not getting all this data. They're like, we don't want your phone. And you think about it, I'm only taking this much bandwidth. Everybody else is taking this much bandwidth. You'd think they'd want me on there because I'm pretty cost efficient. I'm still paying the same price, but only sending out this much data. But they didn't want that. They didn't like it. So just be aware, sometimes the cell phone companies in certain countries, they like collecting. They like that. They make money off of it. So they don't like it when they can't make money off of spyware, so to speak.
Wow. そういった小さなことかもしれないんですけれども、でもそういったことをすることで自分の身の回りを、自分の身を守ることができます。で、そういった携帯、そういったことができるコントロール、自分がコントロール、持ち主がコントロールできる携帯というのはいくつかオプションもあります。そして、一番大事なのは要するに持ち主がコントロールを持つということ、そして携帯が何をしているかというのを把握できることができること、それが大事です。皆さんが持っている Android、Apple の携帯などはもうスパイをし放題で、皆さんがシャットダウン、電源をオフにしたと思ってもその状態でもいっぱいいろんな情報を集めて売っています。で、ちょっと面白いお話をしたいと思いますが、今私がお見せした小さな携帯がありましたけど、この携帯使い始めて2週間持っていましたけれども、そうしましたらある携帯会社に行ったらですね、この携帯に対してはサービスを提供しないと言われたそうなんです。で、なぜかというと、この携帯は、文字送信、そして、この通話、この2つしか本当にシンプルにやらないもので、周波数もですね、皆さんはこんだけたくさんの周波数使って情報を、発信したり奪われたりしてますけれども、私の携帯は本当にもう情報量も本当に少ない。同じ値段を払いながら、 これだけしか自分は使わないって言ってるのに、携帯会社はその、私の携帯に対してサービスを提供しないと言ったわけです。要するに、携帯会社の態度を見ても分かる通り、彼らは皆さんの情報を欲しがっている。そういった情報を受け入れる人たちにしかサービスを提供しないと言っている状況が分かると思います。OK。
Oh, we're still on? Okay. So the other thing I would say is if you are going to, for your Japanese audience, if they are going to look at getting a Linux-based phone or some other alternate phone, check with your cell phone carrier to make sure they will accept it, and then go ahead and buy it. So always check first because you may get it, and the cell phone carrier may go, yeah, we want the spy phones. We don't want you having non-spy phones. So you'll have to check with, I think it's NTT or Docomo or whatever cell phones you have in Japan. Check with them first, let them know, and then buy the system that you're going to get.
わあ、日本の皆さんに対してはアドバイスなんですけれども、皆さんがこういったコントロールできるちゃんとした本を、買って日本で使おうとするときに、まず初めに買う前にですね、日本にあるドコモとかNTT のような携帯に電波を提供するこういった会社が皆さんが買おうとしている携帯に対してサービスを提供するかどうかというのを確かめてから買うようにしてください。なぜなら携帯会社はスパイ携帯は、サービスを提供するけど、スパイではない携帯に対してはサービスを提供しないかもしれないからです。
Okay. And again, I'll keep it quick because I know we're in that 10-minute window here. So, and so that's the cell phones. And if anybody has questions, they can contact through you, I guess, through your FAD club, and then we can answer some more specifics if they have those specifics. But those are good ones.
Okay.
And there's a good guy on YouTube for the public stuff. It's Rob Braxman, and he's really good on internet privacy. In fact, he's the guy that custom makes these cell phones, the Brax 3 phones. And he can go into much more detail about the information that leaks out through your phones.
Okay. この携帯に関してはですね、お話は以上にしたいと思いますけれども、またもし皆さんから質問がありましたら、ガナハさんを通してですね、私に質問を、送ってくださいということです。そしてこういった情報に関してとても詳しい人物としては、Hold on.はい、一旦カメラが切れましたが戻りました。はい、そういった情報に対して詳しい人物というのはロブ・ブラックスマンという方です。この方は YouTube も持っていますけれども、この方が実はカスタムメイドの携帯を販売もしている方で、この方がですね、より詳しいお話をされております。で Maybe we should put his YouTube or contact information. Odyssey, that's
Odyssey,
right.
yeah, what's an Odyssey? Yeah, because YouTube you get banned off of a lot because it's FASHTEK. So Odyssey's the way to go.
Oh, so he get banned too?
Oh yeah, absolutely. He would, yeah.
Yeah, of course. my stupid question, sorry. このロブ・ブラックスマンバッチョボーナー。名誉なことでありますが、このロブ・ブラックスマンさんも、YouTube では、もう排除されてしまって、オーディシーというところで動画などを配信しています。Okay,
and that's a good one to transition to. So we've talked about the phones. Now we'll talk a little bit about some of the FASHTEK that you work with on your computer and how it's used to kind of control what you see and then also collect your information and resell it. And you don't think of it on your computer. Your phone, okay, you kind of get, but what you do online, depending on what you use for your software or what browser you use, your information is being shared and sold all over the place, just like your phone.
Okay.携帯のお話はこれぐらいにしまして、今度はですね、パソコンに移りたいと思います。で、パソコンを使っていてもですね、携帯と同標にですね、いろんなこのネットサーフィンなどをしてブラウザを使ったりすることによって、どんどん情報は抜けていっております。
And again, to kind of give you an example of what we do, because we don't want when we're in areas we don't want information to get out to, when we want to get little lean. We actually build up, these are old Panasonic tough books. It's old tech, but it's great because the chipsets in there are verified not to come from China. Very, very important. that your chipsets don't come from China, that it's manufactured. These are still primarily manufactured mostly in Japan, which was great. I wish they still made these. We would buy lots of these. But you have to get old Panasonic tough books, but then you put Linux on it. So you take off your Windows. You could put Linux on a system, and then you have more control over your system and what goes in there, especially with things like Windows 11, which you pretty much don't have any control of anything that's on Windows 11 anymore. So you put a Linux system on it. Chipsets are pretty good. It's not gonna broadcast out. You have a lot of physical controls where you can shut things off, and these are actually more secure than a laptop or especially a Chromebook that you buy today. These are far more secure for keeping your information in your control and not allowing it to kind of go out.
OK。今私が持って手元にあるものですけれども、実はこれ自分でですね、カスタムしました。それはパナソニックの、ノートパッドなんですけれども、これはですね、チップセット、基板ですかね、がメイドインチャイナでないことは、実は非常に重要なことです。で、これはですね、古いものなんですけど、日本製のものです。このチップセットも含めて。で、中に入っていた Windows の代わりに Linux を入れます。で、特に Windows でも11、11のバージョンというのは、皆さん使用者は全く、コントロールをすることができません。Windows 11というのはですね、もう、相当にいろんな情報を抜かれたりだとか、コントロールを奪われています。でも、この古いものに Linux 入れることによって、しかもチップも日本製、こういう形にすることで、どんなパソコンよりも一番、安全なものができます。
Yep, but unfortunately, we heard from Moe Fukada that the Panasonic has burned down. They don't make anything anymore in Japan, so we're kind of sad to hear that. So, so hopefully, Japan can start making those chipsets again, so that you guys can, because that's really good tech. There's a lot of companies and agencies that would really like to have some good tech again, like those Panasonic tough books. It used to be standard in all the police cars, here in the United States. So, but like I said, I heard from Moe Fukada that pretty much Panasonic doesn't make those anymore in Japan, sadly.
Wow. 深田萌さんという日本のですね、IT アナリストの方がいらっしゃいますけれども、彼女から聞きましたら、もう日本ではパナソニックはですね、こういったものをもうこれ以上使わなくなってしまっている、このチップセットなどですね、これは非常に残念なことで、あります。で、こういったパナソニックなどがまた日本製のものをきちんと作るということは非常に大事で、それをぜひ再開してほしいと思います。
So on your personal computer, if you use a browser, so what browser you use can determine how much information we can get from you. So if you're using something like Chrome or Internet Explorer is kind of gone now, but some browsers are not conducive to privacy, and they're also susceptible to manipulation or influence from different vectors. Let's put it that way. So what we do, and we recommend to people who are wanting A, their privacy, and B, to be able to get information freely and not be manipulated or closed in for information, because people forget the internet they think is this big open free information. It's not. There's actually many different ways that manipulation can occur where you have tunnel vision in the internet. You're not seeing anything around you that's on the internet. You're seeing pretty much what that has been pipelined in there, and that's the biggest surprise that a lot of people have, is that we show them how you can be manipulated on the internet. You can type in things in Google on a Chrome browser, and depending on what's been on your computer before, what has been loaded for the cookies, all these things.
Okay. Sorry. It says nobody has turned on their camera yet. Okay, we are back again. Okay, so you're talking about Google's. Yes.
Well, as an example, so again, people think that when you're on the internet, you can get all sorts of information. So if I type in something on Google on a Chrome browser on a Windows 11 system, I'm going to get free information. I can go out on the internet and all the information's out there. The truth is no. What you're seeing is a very complex algorithm plus some other factors that kind of channel you in to see only certain things. So there's a lot that you'll never see, even sometimes if you type it in directly. We've practiced on this a couple ways. You can actively look for what you know is there, and the system will actually move you around it. It'll give you alternates, but it won't give you that information. And so you're trapped. In other words, wait a minute, I expect to go on the internet and I want to see everything, but it may not be there. So what we'll talk about now is how you can go around that and get more accurate information. In other words, FASHTEK is telling you can only see this, but I want to see what's out there. I want to judge for myself. How do I do that? So that's what we'll talk about here right now.
Okay. Wow. 今のお話をまとめますと、このブラウザを皆さんが何を使うかによって情報を得ようとしている人たちがどれくらい皆さんから情報を取ることか盗むことができるのか、そういうものが決まってきます。例えば Chrome とかそういったものを使っていたりだとかすると、もうこれはですね、いろんな情報を抜き取られもしますし、また、明確には表現はしませんけれども、いろいろな人々、組織から、操作されることが、起こります。そしてまた、インターネット検索に関してのお話になりますけれども、皆さんは無料でインターネットからいろんな情報をですね、もらっていると思っているかもしれませんが、実はそうではありません。検索すれば何でも情報が出てくると思っているかもしれませんが、実際はそういうわけでもないのです。どういうことかというと、皆さんが Google などで検索をして何かヒットしますが、これというのはある意味アルゴリズムによって情報欲しいものはここにあるんだけれども、そこに行かないように別のところに誘導されてですね、トラップ、罠にはまってそこの行きたい情報には行かないように実はされている。あるけれども隠されているアルゴリズムによってですね、そういうふうな動きがあります。ですから皆さんがインターネットで見ている情報というのは、ある意味フィルター、パイプラインがあって、そのフィルターをかけられて、操作をされて皆さんは見せられているということを自覚しなければ、なりません。Okay, I think that our voice is still going, but not the camera. Okay, please go ahead. We will call it FASHTEK manipulation.
There we go. It's either CCP or FASHTEK, so probably FASHTEK in this case. So how do you kind of break free of the FASHTEK control of it? Well, it's very difficult because everything that you've ever done on your IP address, wherever you've logged in from, there's a certain kind of like a serial number in your computer, and that goes out and that's used. All of that builds up a history, and everything is used in this profile of who you are, and then they're going to shape, where you go from that. But one thing that you can do is change browsers. That's probably the easiest thing to do, and the best one we've found so far is a browser called Brave, Brave. And the Brave browser is very good for A, privacy, and B, it's not trying to move you over and manipulate you. The other thing it does, which is interesting, is it will actually, the money that usually is, okay.
Okay, so let me translate this point. ということでですね、このファッシュテックからどのように身を守るかなんですけれども、この IP アドレス、皆さんがそういった情報を集める、ブラウザを使っているとすると、この IP アドレスとかそういった情報を抜き取られて、その情報をもとに皆さんがどういう人であるのか、 それをアルゴリズムが判断して、そしてブラウザで検索をして出てくる検査結果に影響が出てくる。どういうふうな罠を仕掛けられるわけなんですけれども、一番手っ取り早い対策方法としては、ブラウザー自体を変えるということです。で、その中で私たちが一番いいと思っているブラウザーは、ブレイブブラウザー、BRAVE という名前のブラウザーがありまして、これが一番プライバシーの意味で良いブラウザーというふうに今思っております。Okay, so I just introduced about Brave browser.
Good. So that's one thing you do. The other interesting part about Brave is it's not just privacy and it's not just the ability to kind of freely access information that's not going to keyhole you into pipeline you into certain information. When you use Brave and you look at websites and you do things, that advertising dollar that they normally get, they actually give you a little bit of that, so you can give it to the creators. So you create your own kind of cyber currency. Normally, other internet provider or internet browsers just take that money and they use it. So you never get anything back. It's kind of like a slavery in a way. All by work, someone else is getting money. Brave actually shares that with you. Like, hey, you've earned it. Here you go. But you can choose who you give it to. So I like this creator. I like this website. I'm going to give you these Brave credits that they can get. So that's a nice thing. Odyssey does that also. The video. So you can choose. You build up a certain amount of credit, advertising dollars, and then you can choose the creator that you give that to. YouTube doesn't do that, right? So that's another thing that Odyssey and Brave do. Not only are they open, but that's what makes them non-fascist. They're not taking everything from you, and I'm going to control your money. I'm going to control, the fruits of your labor. I'm going to allow you to be able to provide. You get some money back for your work on the internet, so to speak. So that's a nice thing about Brave and Odyssey.
このブレイブブラウザーのいいところなんですけれども、この皆さんからブラウザーは情報を得る。で、それを売り返して、そのブラウザーなどの企業というのはお金を得るわけです。利益を得るわけです。この構造というのはある意味皆さんの働きによって得た利益を第三者が取るということですから、奴隷みたいな状況ではありますけど、でも YouTube などはその利益というのを彼らが全部取っていきますが、オーディシーという動画をアップロードするサイトですとか、あるいはブレイブブラウザーなどのユニークな点というのは、それによって生まれた利益、サイバーカーレンシー、サイバー空間の、お金ですね。これを誰の利益にするかというのを皆さんが選ぶことができるわけです。ですから、そういった点に関してユニークでありますし、そういったことというのは、この YouTube とかそういったこのファッシュテックにを儲からさせないという点でも非常に重要であります。Okay.
So the other thing that you can do on it, so that's the browser. But where do you look for information? Most people go Google, or here in America, they will go to, for example, DuckDuckGo. Now, Google, anything you search in Google, that's really attached to your profile. That they really just, that they are building up huge profiles on you, and they're very manipulative about what you're going to see. There's some very good open source news articles actually about how Google was actively maneuvering in search engines, and they know human nature. The first 5 returns that I get on my search query, that's usually what most people do. They never go past 5. So as long as Google could stack that first 5, that's what most people are going to see, right? So it wasn't quite a fair search engine result, right? So they're manipulating what people see and what you can look at. And sometimes things were omitted. We actively searched for pages we knew were there, and Google would never show it to us. And it was funny, unless we typed in the exact address. So it was quite interesting to see. So what do? Well, there's an alternate that we like, which is called Jibiru, Gibiru. And it's a very good search engine.
この、どういったブラウザを使うかという話になりますけれども、ほとんどの人は Google あるいは DuckDuckGo というブラウザを使っていることでしょう。Google なんか特にそうですけれども、皆さんが検索をしてそういったどこをクリックするとかそういったいろんな情報というのはもうダイレクトに直接に皆さんのプロファイルというこの Google が持ったデータですねを蓄積して大きなそのデータを構築していくのにそのデータは利用されていくわけです。で、例えば、 この Google のプロファイルがどんどん出来上がっていくわけなんですけれども、そういったものによってアルゴリズムが、こういうの人にはこういうものを見せようっていうふうに、この検索結果に影響をさせるわけです。で、ほとんどの人は最初の検索の1、2、3、4、5、5つぐらいは見ますけれども、その後下はあまり見る人はいません。だから、その人に見せたいものの上位検索の5つぐらいにボンと入れることで、この操作、影響を皆さんに与えようとしているわけです。で、そういったことをしない、そういったところから自分の身を守るために、他のブラウザーとしては、ジビルブラウザというもう一つブラウザがありまして、それを皆さんにお勧めしたいと思います。I'm actually using Jibiru, but how do you pronounce it again? Could you
Well,
please?
I call it Jibiru. I'm not sure how the creators intended it to be pronounced, but I call it Jibiru.
Okay, and how do you pronounce G-I?
Gibiru.
OK。Gibiru、ジビルというふうに、名前なってますが、そのもの、ブラウザーですね、我々使っています。私も実際使っています。And somebody just commented that this person uses Brave browser.
Ah, very good. They're ahead of the curve. You've got smart fans. That's impressive. That's very good.
視聴者の方でですね、ブレイブブラウザを使っている人がいますよって言ったら、さすがですねと、頭のいい視聴者さんですねとおっしゃっておりました。OK。
Okay. And then I'm not sure do I share the screen or is that going to blow this thing up? I'm not sure. Should we not do it? I'm afraid.
Let's try.
Let's try it. Okay, we'll try it. We'll see. So I'll share the screen now.
はい、スクリーンをシェアします。
So let me know if you guys can see it. I'm not sure if your folks can see it.
Yes, I think it's going well. 皆さん、スクリーンシェアが見えますでしょうか？ Yes, we can see it. So please go ahead.
Okay, so this is Jibiru, Gibiru. And two things it does. Number one is, like I said, it won't, your privacy is assured. Now, DuckDuckGo, for example, also says they protect the privacy, but they will manipulate the search results and censor search results. And they were open about it a few months ago. They said they're actually going to change what you see on your search queries. So they in effect censor. So they may protect privacy, but you also have to be aware that sometimes your privacy is protected, but they're still censoring what you see. Jibiru, from what I've seen so far, is both private and it allows you to see, it doesn't try to censor your results or pipeline you.
今ですね、画面でご覧いただいているのは Jibiru というこのブラウザーなんですけれども、これはですね、プライバシーの面と、そして検索結果に干渉を与えないという面で、これまで私が使っている上ではいいというふうに思っております。で、中には DuckDuckGo というブラウザを使っている方もいるかもしれません。DuckDuckGo はプライバシーを守るという面ではそうかもしれませんけれども、検索結果に関しては検閲をすることが明らかになっておりまして、実は最近のですね、ニュースという彼らの自身のアナウンスメントで、この検索結果に関してですね、こういうものは、利用者に対して見せませんと、そういうアナウンスを実際しておりましたので、DuckDuckGo はそういう状況になっております。
So to give you an idea, and again, this is even on my system. However, we'll give you an example. So I'm typing in Senkaku Islands on Jibiru on Brave, and what you're seeing initially is there's a Wikipedia, but then you have the MOFA of Japan, and then you have the dispute, and then you have another Ministry of Foreign Affairs Japan. And then you have things talking about, what is China's strategy, and then a BBC article. So overall, it's fairly neutral. In fact, it's positive a little more for the Japanese because it has two MOFA articles, and then it talks about the conflict. But it really, when you read these, it doesn't take sides in that until you get down to about here. Remember, we talked about your top 5 are usually the ones that most people go to. So the top 5 here are fairly positive for Japan and the Senkaku Islands on that.
ではですね、この皆さん画面でこのJibiruという検索でですね、尖閣というふうに検索をしてみましょう。そうするとどういうものが出てくるかというと、上の方から見ていくと、外務省のサイト記事が2つ並んですぐ出てきました。その下には、この中国とのこの尖閣問題に関する この対立に関しての記事が出てきて BBC の記事が出てくると。でもこういった記事を読んでみてもこの、全体的に見れば、日本に対してですねフェアあるいはポジティブな検索結果と言えると思います。で先ほど申したように上から12345つの検索結果というのを大体人々は見るわけですから、そういうことを考慮してもこの検索結果というのはですね、日本にとってもいい検索、日本にとってというか、フェアな検索と、ポジティブだと言えると思います。
But now let's try that over here with Google, right? So let's try it over here with Google.
Google ではやってみましょう。
And you're going to see something interesting. So right here, the way that Google frames the information, it's already got Dao. So you've got the two Chinese names. And so you're already setting up in the mind of the person, well, wait a minute, maybe it's also Dao, maybe it's also Daiotai. And then you have together, you've got the Senkaku Islands dispute right below the islands. And then these questions, who owns the Senkaku Islands? And if you read it, it says, it's not exactly, it takes a little bit more of an approach for the Chinese claim. In fact, this one here, this is the fourth down. People also ask, you had this one here, and it leads you to an article by Tim Liao. And he talks about, and it's actually very subtle propaganda for Dayu being the property of China, right? So instead of saying Senkaku, he puts it in front rather than Senkaku Daio. And then the way he phrases it is actually very, very clever piece of propaganda for the Chinese claim. See, in the Washington Post. So if we look at the results from Google, the top 5 are favorable toward the Chinese claim in what they do. And then there's MOFA down here. But your initial framing, which is where 90% of your people are just going to go right here. They're not going to really scroll down and look at anything else, right? People that are looking for information about, hey, what's Senkaku? Right here. And you've already got promoting Chinese claims hidden within a lot of these images. So Google will definitely kind of frame it and move that information in a way that they want to politically, whereas Jabiro is just like, it goes based on a more of a fair algorithm about information itself.
では Google で検索をしてみますけれども、そうすると出てくるのはこのような画面になっていまして、まず最初にですね、地図などが出てきますけれども、その尖閣の呼び方の名前がですね、中国名でも出てくる表示されるわけですよ。でこういうのを見てみると読み方はどっちなんだろうなというふうに何も知らない人が検索をただ見る人からするとそういう意識が出てくる。要するに政治的にですね、フレームGoogle によってもう政治的な見方というのが検索結果に与えられているわけです。で出てくる記事というのをちょっと見てみると、例えばワシントンポストであるとか、先ほど開いた記事というのは、この中国共産党の意を組むような記事が出てくる。で尖閣、そしてまた中国を見てないんですけど、その向こうが言っている嘘名前が、日本名が後に来るような出方とかも見ても、そういったプロパガンダ性がわかると思います。でそういったこの5つの最初のものを見ると、その下にですね外務省の記事が出てくるわけでありますから、やはり Google で検索すると要するに政治的に偏った一方的なもの、プロパガンダが出ての見方になってしまいます。Okay.
Okay. So
Yes.
So that's kind of one recommendation for being able to do it. So one, it protects your privacy. Two, you get the ability to be able to provide funds to creators that you want. It's not just kept by the company. But three, you get more open and fair access to information. And then the other one is interesting. So Wikipedia is very, very biased, right? Everybody knows that. But within Brave, there's actually, and Chrome, but Brave especially, you can set up a special app that's in the background. So if I click on this, it says Wikipedia, right? If I click on that, it will automatically redirect it to an alternate to Wikipedia called InfoGalactic. And so whereas Wikipedia skews, very much left, this one tends to skew a little bit right. So you get a balance in there, right? And so if you're clicking and the link is for that article, this sends you to pretty much a Wikipedia, but it's more of a centrist, kind of a more of a balanced Wikipedia, right? Called Infogalactic. And so in this one, you can kind of get a little bit fairer information in that one. So you're not kind of trapped into Wikipedia, and which is part of FASHTEK.
この、ブレイブブラウザの素晴らしい機能があるんですけれども、ウィキペディアを皆さんご存知でしょうか。もちろんウィキペディアの情報というのは偏っているということで皆さんもご存知だと思いますけれども、例えばブレイブブラウザで何かを検索してウィキペディアの、このヒットが出たとします。でももしそれに特別なアプリがありまして、それと掛け合わせて使うとですね、そのアプリを入れることによってブレイブブラウザに出てきたウィキペディアをクリックすると、ウィキペディアの実際のページではなくて、ウィキペディアに変わるようなインフォガラクティックという、ウィキペディアのようなものですけど、ウィキペディアのように偏っていないウェブサイトに、飛ばされる記事が、画面がですね、そのページに飛ぶような機能がついて、います。そういった機能もとても、ユニーク、だと、思います。
And then the other thing you can do, so that's another thing that you can do is that fights FASHTEK, right? Because even if the search engine tries to send you there, you can go somewhere else that's a little fairer. And then that's on the Wikipedia. It also gives you the opportunity over here that you can actually pick what you don't want to see, right? In other words, for example, that say CNN and Fox and maybe MSNBC are worthless, right? It's worthless. You can actually pick them and it's not going to show up. You won't be able to see any feeds from this or any advertisement dollars from these. You're not going to click a link that's going to make these people money, right? So you pick, and it's fair. It's across the board. See, there's NTD. You've also got Epoch Times. You've got PBS. You've got CNN. You pick the FASHTEK, or you pick the companies that you don't want your advertising dollars to go to when you click a link. And you pick that, and this will block it out. But you control that, not the browser. So you get to pick it, which ones you don't want to see and you don't want to give advertisement money to.
Wow. 要するに私たちが考えなければいけないのは、このファッシュテックとどのように戦うかなんですけれども、このブラウザのですね、ユニークなところはもう一つありまして、今画面で出ているたくさんのこのアイコンの部分がありますけれども、これはどういうものかというと、このネットサーフィンなどをすることによって、ネット広告の広告利益がありますが、その広告利益を誰が広告利益を受けてほしくないかというのを選べるわけです。で、この中でいろんなニュースのものとか、いろんなこの、サイト出てきますけど、これは結構ですね、全部を網羅していて、フェアなんですね。だから、逆に中には、大期限、エポックタイムスなどのこのアイコンも出てきますし、もう右から左までいろんなところのものが選べて、この人、この会社、この会社には自分から生まれたこの広告の利益を与えたくないと思ったらそこを選ぶと、そういうことができるものになっております。
And for your Japanese fans, I'm looking through here and I don't see any Japanese in there, so they may have to search. There may be another app that will do this and integrate in with the Brave browser for the Japanese media, like if you didn't want to look at Fuji TV or something like that, because these are mostly the Western media. There's the South China Morning Post in there, but this is for the English language media. So there may be another app that's developed for that, but I don't know of it specifically. So this is for the Western media. You'd have to look for another one for the Japanese language media.
Okay. 今ここに出ているものというのは、この英語で書かれている英語が言語のいろんなメディアがいろいろ出てきますけれども、日本のバージョンはもしかしたら探せばですね、そういった機能も追加されているのかもしれません。日本バージョンはですね、ちょっとまだ定かではありませんが、ぜひ、チェックしてみてください。
So, but this gives you an idea of the control that Brave allows you to have over your settings. So, that's a good thing.
今の機能というのはもう一度言いますけど、これはブレイブブラウザーの機能です。So I want to just ask you, Brave is the browser and Jibiru is the search engine, correct?
Exactly. Yep. And they're not related. So they're separate, but these are the ones that we use and we've got the best results of so far.
OK. この私が確認したのはですね、ブレイブというのはブラウザーなんですよね。ブラウザー。で、ジビルというのは検索エンジンですか。この2つの会社は関係はしていないんですけれども、この組み合わせが一番ベストであると今の時点で思っております。
And then one thing I wanted to show, should have talked about earlier, on social media. So, for example, if you're on social media, and this will also occur with your phone with the heat map, but there's heat map on social media. So when you're on Facebook, when you're on Twitter, when you're on any of these things, what this does is this is a very simplified map of one person, but it's all of her stats, even your email. So if you use Gmail, for example, you can get that information about how much email they sent, how many was received, and these have been blanked out for privacy. But this is what companies will see is how much money, or excuse me, how many emails you sent or how much messages you sent to one person, how much you sent to another person, if you sent pictures to that person. These network mappings, and they're weighted. So you can see you spent a lot of time with this person, you spent a little bit of time with that person, and this is blanked out again for privacy, but they will name them. This is the information you're putting out there and that's being bought and sold.
Wow. 今皆さんご覧いただいているこのマップがありますけど、これはですね、このソーシャルメディアを使うことによってできるこのヒートマップと言えます。で、これはネットワークのマッピングと地図化するものと言ってもいいわけですけど、どういうことかというと、これは皆さんが例えば Gmail を使っているとすると、どの人に何通のメールを送ったか、どの人からメールを受け取ったか、写真を送ったのか、とか、この人とこの人の間ではたくさんのコミュニケーションが取られている。こういったものをですね、可視化することができる。こういったこの地図というのを企業は、情報として持っているわけです。
And this was done actually back, this was an MIT project called Immersion way back in 2013. And this was the information they were able to gather just from someone's Gmail. This has gone up exponentially since then. So that it's far more complex. There's far more information that you can glean off of people and who they associate with, what their political views are. There's just a huge matrix of information that people are profiling on you and getting from you that you're trading out. So be very, very careful on not just your phone, not just your browser, but social media and even what email you use because your information is accessible.
Wow. これはですね、この地図というのは実際この MIT のプロジェクトが大学だと思いますけど、MIT のプロジェクトで、で使われたものなんですけれども、これが、意味することというのはどういうことが分かってくるかというと、皆さんがメールを使ってどういう人と、親しく、どういう人と関わりを持っているのか、そういったつながりというのがこれで分かってくる、こういった情報が分かるわけです。で、プロファイリング、この人のプロフィールですね、も分かると。ですから、携帯だけじゃなくて、パソコンだけじゃなくて、実はどういったメール機能を使うかっていうのも非常に重要な問題です。
And this is kind of a self-test one if you wanted to. So you can actually put your, if Wolfram Alpha, you can use this service, this app, and it will tell you what you look like on Facebook, right? So you put your information in there and it gives you a little bit of a peek. And this is actually not as much as some other programs will get, but it will show you where your friends are, who you communicate with, their friend network. And this is the one that's most disturbing to me. What you talk about, what you put in your private messages, what you put into your posts throughout the entire time you've been on Facebook or Twitter or anything is mapped and it's measured. And it's actually put against an algorithm that's put onto your social profile, which is increasingly more and more being used as a social credit profile about what you can see, what you can get access to, and that sort of thing. So this is very disturbing in that it's claimed to be for advertising purposes, but in actuality, it's being used for social conformity and some enforcement purposes.
Wow. このサイトはですね、ウォルフ、ちょっとまた後から聞きますけど、ウォルフなんとかかんとかっていう名前のサイトなんですけど、実際にそういった会社などが、どういうふうにあなたの情報を見ているかというのを自分でですね、試すことができるんですよね、マッピングするのを。で、その中で出てくるのが、どういうふうなマップを皆さんが持っているのか、実際にどこの国に住んで、どこに住んでいる人たちとこの人は、 いろいろとつながっているのかというものを確認することもできますし、また何を実際話しているのか、何を実際この人は、検索したりとかメールを送ったり考えたりとかそういうものをしているのかっていうものまでも見えてしまうわけなんですよね。で、これというのはアルゴリズムにももちろん連携されますし、ソーシャルプロファイル、このネット上のあなたの人格プロファイルというものがこれで形成されていく。で、それで恐ろしいことが、社会信用システムっていうんですか、中国でもソーシャルクレジットって言いますけれども、人々にスコアをつけていく。このソーシャルクレジットにもつながりかねないものです。
And further, there's some evidence that these FASHTEK companies are sharing this information. So, for example, on Facebook, they'll compile a list of kind of forbidden words or words that are what they call problematic or, set off alarm bells for them, right? So if you have those words in your post a lot, they will kind of flag that, they will emphasize it, and then they will also, there's some evidence to indicate that they share that with Twitter, they share that with YouTube, they share that with some of the other social media sites, Instagram, they own the Instagram. And so they'll create this profile about you and then they can shut you off. So suddenly you're banned from Twitter. You can't figure out why, right? Because you have these words that they consider problematic, right? Because it's against whatever cause that they have at the moment. And then they can ban you based on what you've talked about in a conversation over the last 10 years. They've profiled.
Okay, we are back. So, may I translate the part you just talked?
Okay, so we'll go back to the screen. All right.
Yes. ですね、また切れてしまいましたが、すみません。例えば Facebook なんですけれども、先ほどお見せしたこういった情報というのを、Facebook が例えば YouTube、Instagram、Twitter、そういったものにですね、その人のソーシャルプロファイルというのを、情報を共有するんですよ、他の会社と。で、例えば Facebook でしたら、問題のある言葉とされるものがあって、このある人物が自分のこの投稿でその言葉をたくさん使っているとかですね、そういったこのネット上の動きで、この人の言論で、この人はレッドフラッグだなとか、こういうふうに、この人はちょっと要注意人物っていうふうに、マークしていくわけですよ。で、そういった情報も YouTube、Instagram、Twitter などと一緒にシェアして共有するもんですから、皆さんが例えば YouTube とかそういったこのソーシャルメディアでいきなり自分のアカウントがシャットダウンされてどうしてこういうことが起きているんだろうかとびっくりするかもしれませんが、実は背景にこのようなことがあるからです。Okay, so I just explained that those people share the social personality so that sudden shutdown on the account is caused by those kind of operation.
Potentially correct. So they share information. And so if you've got certain keywords that come up a lot, and they'll know that you talk about, certain things a lot. If those words or those discussing those things are kind of negative to those companies, they'll shut you down, and they'll shadow ban you. They'll shut you down. And shadow banning is a real thing. It's scientifically proven. They've actually shown that yes, you can be shadow banned, and how that works. And so you have to realize everything you say online is measured, cataloged, and used. So just be aware of that.
Wow. ですからこういったことが起きるわけで、このキーワードというのがありまして、そのキーワードというのを、皆さんがたくさん使うことになれば、そういったこういったこの会社、ファッシュテックから目をつけられて、そしてシャドーバンというのも起こります。で、このシャドーバンっていうのは何も根も葉もない嘘ではなくて、実際に科学的にですね、これは、起こっている。この技術としても起こりうるということはもう証明されて、おります。OK、聞こえない。Oh, this is so mysterious, and I go so against those keywords. I do not like to censorship myself because I wanted to have healthy mentality. So that's why maybe this account is newly set up because my first main account was banned. But I think they already know who I am, of course.
If it's YouTube, they'll grab, they'll probably have, there's some evidence to show, there's actually a lot of evidence to show they've got your YouTube comments, your Twitter comments, and they pull those together, and all of the words that you say on there, they'll click it and they know what's negative. So if you talk about, a certain political party or a certain political person or certain words that trigger it, they'll measure that and they say, okay, this is a negative, right? And China did the same thing. In fact, a lot of technology companies helped China build its basically its social concentration camp, right? So China is a concentration camp in it's a police state, right? Let's be honest. And the technology that allows them to reach into people's lives, their homes, their computers, their minds, a lot of that was designed, developed, and deployed by tech companies in Silicon Valley in the United States. You see? And now they're implementing those same techniques back here and claiming, well, it's a private business. So that's the problem, is that they are beginning to, it's echoing back. Organizational structure dictates outcome. If I build this structure, they're going to implement it. And it just, no matter what their good intention is, if you build up a structure a certain way, it's going to go in a certain direction. And that's what they're doing.
Okay, so I just want to make sure if I understand correctly, what you're saying is that those FASHTEK company helped the CCP to develop those social political camp
Exactly.
in China. They are then criminals, straight up criminals.
And that's why you don't see a lot of criticism of China. And that's sad. I mean, you don't see a lot of criticism with the big FASHTEK companies against the CCP because they were actively involved in modeling it. In fact, some see that as a model society. There's a group of people, a large group of people. You can basically break down the world into kind of three groups. One believes that you need to be controlled, right? That there's oligarchs and you need to be controlled. Most people are stupid, and there's a certain group that's higher than everyone else, and we need to run you, right? And that's kind of the CCP. That's fascism, that's Nazism, that's communism. It's all those kind of autocratic dictatorial regimes. And unfortunately, a lot of tech people have gone into that, which is kind of surprising, because that was supposed to be free and open and kind of live up to human potential. And it's taken a very dark turn. And then the other side says, you know what? Human beings, as flawed as they are, still have right. You're born with these rights. I don't care if you're born poor, if you're born rich. I don't care if you're born, black or white or anything. You have these rights, and you're just as equal as I am. And you have the same access to things that I do, as long as you work for it. And those two conflict, because the people that want this control, they justify it in different ways, but they really are afraid, if you look at it, of people having some self-determination. They don't like that. And again, that's why, to me, there's really not much difference between fascism, Nazism, communism. It's the same outcome. It's a very, very small group of people controlling and silencing and enslaving a majority of people. And so that's why I call it FASHTEK, because that's what they do. They silence people. They they change history. I've seen that. It's pretty sad.
Okay. この最初のお話に戻りますけれども、この中国という国は現在、正しい呼び方をするのであれば、 政治的な、もう、強制隔離収容所、国自体がもう、政治的にこの収容所になっているわけなんですけれども、何もかも政府が管理をすると。でいろんなテクノロジーを導入することによって人々を全て監視する社会になっていますけれども、実際そういったテクノロジーをその国に導入するのを手伝ったのはこういったファッシュテクであるわけです。で彼らはある意味、そういったこの中国の状況というのを、そういった未来社会のモデル的な国であるというふうにもう考えているわけです。で、そういったファッシュテクが中国で監視社会を作り上げるのを手伝っているわけですから、今の状況というのはその中国で行ったものをモデルを世界に広めている、そういった向こうにまずは導入していって、そこから世界に広めているっていう風な構図で見なければ、なりません。で、私は世界をですね、3つのパートに分けます。1つは、中国共産党とかの独裁が、敷かれる何でもコントロールされるオリガークがいるようなこの世界、監視社会。で、もう一つは、人々は、人権があって生まれながらの権利を持っている、そういった権利を尊重されなければならないと考える社会であります。で、もう一つお聞きしましょう。So you're saying there are three societies. One is totally controlled, like China, and the other one is the one that respect human rights. What is the other one?
The ones that don't care.
Okay, so don't care.
They don't care either way. As long as I'm eating, I'm good to go, right? that's kind of most people are not involved. I mean, let's be honest, right?
3つ目の国は何ですかと聞いたらですね、もうどうでもいい、そんなことももう何も関係しないという、もう混乱状態の国ということです。Okay, so we talked about those how we are manipulated by daily uses of those FASHTEKs, and maybe so it's been maybe one hour. No,
well, maybe you have to subtract the time we were offline, right? So there's the time, and then there's the actual air time, right? So it's
That's right. Yes. How should we go? I would like to maybe propose this plan. Maybe I think many people love to listen to more of this, and maybe if we rush into this because there are so many lists that we need to learn. So what I'm trying to say is that maybe we can do second episode, or what do you think?
Sure. Yeah. If your viewers want more, we can definitely set that up.
Yes. Many people, and especially today, because I am having difficulty with those connections, maybe it's better to have second one to continue. But I would like to I would like you to continue a little bit more, and then maybe have conclusion for the first lesson.
Okay, sure. And
Yes.
the final thing is something that people can do on their own. So it's kind of a big scary thing. It's eye-opening. I mean, it's really surprising for a lot of people when we first show them all of the information they're giving out, all the information that's being taken from you, the information you voluntarily give out and don't realize it, and then the bad things that can happen to you. And so that's one level. The other level, though, is again these big companies. You think, well, what can we do against FASHTEK? Well, a couple things. One thing that's surprised me was that Twitter, Facebook were very dependent not upon advertising dollars, not upon subscription dollars. They made a lot of their operational revenue from retirement funds, and this was interesting to me. So there was about 3 or 4 investment companies that were putting their money into Twitter and Facebook. In one case, it was 1 year it was almost 80% of their operational revenue. And so it shows they're not big business because they don't care. I mean, they could lose. You saw it when they were kind of dealing back and forth with Elon Musk. They really didn't care if they made money or not. They wanted control, you see, because they're getting most of their money from an investment firm putting money in there with retirement. So one thing I would also tell people to be very, very, very cautious of, and it's not just FASHTEK. Your money goes places you probably don't want it invested. When you put your retirement dollars, pension dollars, retirement dollars, or investment dollars into a company, be very, very careful of where that company puts their investment money, because there's about 3 firms out there. We'll talk later about it if your fans are interested. But that was subsidizing Facebook and Twitter to silence people. I mean, they literally paid it because everybody could leave. You could lose 80% of your Twitter people, and Twitter would still make money because the investment dollars were still coming in. Their operational revenue was still coming in, so they could afford to lose 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 people. They didn't care about the customer. That's not big tech. That's not a business. That is an institution with an agenda, right? A business would care. I don't want to lose my customers, right? I don't want to, right? If your customer is the people on the accounts, the people that have Facebook accounts, the people that have Twitter accounts, if that's your customer, you care about what they see, that you care about what they think, you care about how they think about your product. People don't realize you're not the customer of Facebook, you're not the customer of Twitter, you're the product. They're selling your information and they're making money because investment companies keep them in operational ability by investing money, so they can do whatever they want. And again, the whole Elon Musk thing with Twitter kind of highlighted that. They actually didn't care, one way or the other what the books looked like. They were more interested in maintaining this kind of control. That was their initial reaction, rather than, hey, here's a bunch of money coming in. This is great, right? Any other business would have been, hey, let's do this. This is great. Elon Musk with his tech, this is fantastic. But instead, they were terrified. They were afraid. The U.S. government, some branches of that actually started attacking Elon Musk. So you're thinking, wait a minute, what's going on here? People are the product, and to get yourself out from being a product, you don't need to be a product. You want to be an independent consumer. You have to realize, take control of your information, take control of what platforms you're on, what information you give those platforms. And this is the start. Change your browser, change how you look, go to Odyssey versus, say, YouTube. Little things that you can begin to do so that you're not controlled, so that nobody's making money off of you and then trying to use that money later on to turn around and silence you and manipulate you. That's the beginning. The next level, of course, would be, look where your investment funds are, look where your company puts their investment funds, and make sure it's not going into things like FASHTEK that's used to silence people. If that's not your belief, that you think people should be controlled, silenced, and enslaved, then that's important. And we can talk more about that later. And again, if anybody has questions, they can definitely reach out to you. You're in contact with me a lot. And again, everything I'm talking about, and this is very important, these are things that anybody can kind of look up with tools that we have, the OSINT tools, the information that you're giving out there. Nothing here has been, any secret government stuff. The government stuff, they're going to find it. That's even higher than this. This is basically what a normal person with a little bit of skill sets can be able to look up and find about you, and that sort of thing. So that's pretty much my thing. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them in whatever format you need. And if they're interested, I can come back.
Okay, thank you very much. 今のお話ですけれども、この私たちが気をつけなければいけない、一番、注目して考えなければならないことは、ツイッターなどのファッシュテクというのは何でお金を得ているかという事実に関してです。彼らの収益というのは実は、この利用者の我々が利用してそこから広告収入が入る。これは実は主な収入源ではありません。実は彼らの主な収入源というのは、退職金などを、投資する人々からのこのお金、この流れが 70%、80% を占めている彼らの収入源に実はなっているのです。ですから我々が、考えなければいけないのは、実はこういったファッシュテクというのは、ビジネスをしている会社でもないということです。私たちは自分のことをお客様と思っているかもしれませんけれども、私たちはお客様では実はありません。私たちは彼らの製品なのです。彼らは、こういうリタイアメントということで、ここから、投資家たちからお金をもらう。この退職金のですね、投資家からお金をもらう。で、それを収入源として、何をするかっていうと、情報を我々から利用者から吸い取って、それを製品として扱う、商品として彼らを扱う。 だから私たちがお客様として本当に見ているのであれば、利用者にとって使いやすいサービスなどを提供する。これが本来のあり方です、形ですけれども、彼らにとって利用者というのはお客様ではそもそもないから、このツイッターの機能とかそういったものが利用者に対してどうであるか、いい製品であるかどうかっていうものは全く関係もないわけです。つまりどういうことかというと、もう一度考えなければいけないのは、我々利用者はカスタマー、お客様ではなくて製品であるということ。で、彼らは要するにコントロール、人々のコントロール、商品のコントロールすることによって、退職金などのこういった、資産がいろいろとつぎ込まれていく。その流れができているということを気づかなければいけません。そしてまた、退職してですね、そのお金をどういうふうに使おうかと考えている人に立っては、この人が、あなたがもしそういったファッシュテックに、投資をするなれば、そのお金というのは人々を、言論封殺、人々の言論封殺をするためにそのお金は使われているということを今一度、実感して考えなければなりません。そしてですね、ですから私たち個人個人はそういったファッシュテックの製品、商品という立場であり続けるのか、あるいはそこから抜け出して自分のことは自分でちゃんとコントロールできる人間になるのか、それを選ぶのも私たちの、判断次第です。で、今申し上げましたが、これらの情報というのは、オープンソースからの、もので私が分析をしているものでありまして、今話しているのは、このレベルだとすると、次にもしまた、視聴者さんがですね、もっとこのお話を聞きたくて、次のエピソードができるとすれば、政府のレベルはもっと上のもので、ありまして、その上のこのネット世界の恐ろしさというものをまた今後ですね、お話をしてみたいと思っております。で、もし皆さんがいろいろな質問などがありましたら、ぜひ、私に、質問をお寄せいただけましたら、答えをしたいと、思っております。Okay, thank you very much. And so I just told them that if people would like to ask questions to you, maybe they can send email to me and then I can send it to you, or maybe they can just leave comments. Well, maybe either way, I will tell. もう質問がありましたら私の方にですね、メールをお寄せいただけましたらと、思います。So basically, I feel like we are in real matrix. and so even though I'm trying to like resisting, because I'm using this YouTube or those kind of things, we get cut off so many times, and now it happened again. I just need to laugh about myself. Yes.
Well, it's perfect. See, and you can always blame FASHTEK. You know, they didn't like what we were talking about, so they kept trying to shut us off.
Yes, and maybe next time, maybe I should do not live, but recording, so that we don't have to worry about those connections. We can just talk.
So, yeah, because if you're not taking questions live, then I guess it's maybe easier recording it. Does Odyssey allow you to go live? I think.
Honestly, I don't know, but the problem that I have is I always do really simple live stream. I have just phone and I start live streaming from wherever I need to do. So that's the thing I'm trying to figure out, how I can do this without going on this kind of platform. Yes, and yes, so I'm just gonna explain what we are gonna do in the future. 皆さん、今ですね、ちょっとこの混乱は何なのかがちょっと原因がわからないんですけれども、私のアカウントは確実に、この目がつけられていると思いますので、ちょっとですね、安定した配信とかも考えて、ライブ配信ではなくて、こういうのは 動画の公開ということで切り替えようかなと思っています。実際皆さんから質問も受けてですね、直接お聞きするっていうことをしたかったんですけれども、なかなかちょっとですね、今厳しい状況に、あります。今日はライブですが、今後収録の方がいいと思っております。はい。では最後にですね、私から、感謝の気持ちとまたちょっと言葉をいただいて締めさせていただきたいと思います。Okay, so I just told people that maybe we're gonna do recording because we cannot take questions or because of those connections. So they're gonna send email to me to questions for you. And I really thank you for giving us this time and great education, and those confusing experiences actually proves what you're saying and what we need to change. Like, I need to change.
Well, everybody does.
So,
it's all part of it. First you have to recognize it, right? Call it for what it is, recognize it, identify it. And now, okay, how do I move around it? Where do I want to go with it? What do I want out of interaction with the internet? And then making those choices about, how can I do that? So very true.
Yes. この今日の勉強はですね、私も身をもって一番自分が変わらなければいけないと感じたものでありました。Okay, once again, could you please say your final words to the audience, and we are going to conclude.
Okay. Well, just basically, thank you very much for allowing me to come on here and talk. My apologies for talking very fast. So it's a lot of information, and I put it out. I apologize, but thank you very much for this. And I look forward to getting the questions from your audience. And so anything that they have, any questions, feel free to bring up any comments. Let us know. But again, thank you very much for this opportunity, and we'll do it again.
皆さん、本日は、お話を聞いてくださいまして大変ありがとうございます。皆さんからの質問を、お待ちいたしておりますので、ぜひお受け取り、お送りいただけたらと、思います。また次の、お話の回でですね、いろいろなお話ができることをとても楽しみに、して、おります。はい。Okay, thank you so much. So I'm going to change to the ending sign. 皆さん、本日ご覧いただきまして大変ありがとうございました。ちょっと今日はですね、このコネクションの問題で止まったりだとかいろいろして見づらかったので大変申し訳ありませんでしたけれども、収録にするかどうかして、またこの貴重なお話をですね、また、発信していきたいと思っておりますので、ぜひ引き続きご覧いただきたいと思います。もう一度、私のメインチャンネルは、2週間停止になっております。おそらくアカウント自体が消されると思いますので、セカンドチャンネルぜひですね、登録をよろしくお願いいたします。そして、ホームページも今作っておりますので、そこからメールアドレスの登録をして情報がいけるようにとかですね、いろいろしますので、ガナハマサコウェブサイトもご覧ください。よろしくお願いします。それでは本日もご覧いただきまして誠にありがとうございました。次の配信でまたお会いしましょう。Once again, thank you very much, Al, and I learned a lot, and we hope to talk again.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.